Hi Chris, how are you?
Yes, good evening, Rod. All is well, and I'm going to get straight into it. So it's the 19th of March, 2024, and it's episode 112. And like I say, I think I've skipped the weather because it's still wet, and I think we've had enough of talking about the rain, so we can get straight into it. But we haven't got a big show because there's not a lot of tech news at the moment. Everybody's eerily quiet, and it feels a bit weird. And this would be a prime time for somebody that just wants to have a punt. You know, maybe they've got something they want to release. This would be a good time for the Rabbit R1 to do an update or something, or the Humane pin, for example, because I worry people like Apple just pile everything into the end of the year when you could get a lot more airtime for free if you just spaced out your releases. And come on, Apple, we want some iPads.
Some of us want some iPads, some of us are less bothered particularly about the iPads, but you know, I think it's reasonable to expect that they release something. I think we got a new MacBook Airs not that long ago, so I think it's not like they've released nothing.
Yeah, but there was nothing to talk about on the MacBook Airs. It's got a new chip in it. Woo!
There is a little bit to talk about. We'll catch up on that in news in a bit, but I think the reason maybe we don't get so many tech products is Apple sucks all the air out of the room later in the year, you know, with WWDC and all that kind of stuff. And it's difficult for other companies to sort of jump in. I know Microsoft have got their events coming up soon. They've got one announced. Google will have theirs too. So there is a bit of space for other companies to do things. But the new interesting gizmo, maybe, which would have been more in CES, just doesn't seem to happen quite so much anymore.
No, and the first bit of the year is a dull bit of the year. Anyway, should we dive into follow-up?
Yeah, let's dive into follow-up. So I struggled a little bit with whether some of these should be follow-up or some of these should be news, because we're kind of mixing that up recently. But this feels more like follow-up to me. And the first story is from The Verge that Sony is apparently pausing PlayStation Virtual Reality Headset version 2's production. You thought about buying one and didn't, so I don't know if this is a massive surprise, really.
Not a massive surprise, because most people I know don't have one of these. But it kind of confirmed why I didn't buy one. I really wanted it for Gran Turismo, and I'm sure it is awesome. But equally, I'm still a bit VR skeptical because I don't want to shut myself off from my family. So I didn't buy one, and I thought £500 wasn't too bad a price, given that Apple's is £3,500. Obviously, the Sony one is a lot more restricted. But there's just not enough content there for it. This is the problem. And I think Apple have got a similar problem with the Vision Pro. They need more developers. They need more buy-in. The hardware looks cool. Do I want to wear something on my head? Probably not. So I'm not surprised, and it's probably just ratified my decision. I've probably taken that £500. I've bought another PlayStation, and I've got some change, which will probably get more use in my household. So I think I made the right call at the end of the day and saved a bit of money.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. I mean, just to echo what you said about the Apple Vision Pro, Marco Arment was talking on ATP this week about how he's not seeing much more in the way of software than what it launched with, you know, in the few weeks that it's been out. And I think that's a problem for Apple. We'll talk about developers and things for their platforms, but they've lost a lot of goodwill. It's an awful lot of money. I'm not surprised they're not seeing it. Sony have a different problem. They had an original PlayStation VR. They knew presumably how well that sold. I presume they thought this is where the new hotness is because Meta are putting things in the market, and presumably the Apple thing was rumoured for them, but it's not selling. They've got a PS5 Pro coming to market as well. They've had a couple of misfires with hardware recently, Sony. I don't know, I mean, the Slim is a little bit better than the original PS5. They've had the Portal, PlayStation Portal, we've talked about a couple of times in this show. You know, they've not got a great background in platforms other than the PlayStation doing well in gaming, and even the PSP and the PS Vita struggled. So I don't know, I'm not surprised really.
No, I'm not surprised. Like I say, just not seeing it there, and I think people are waiting to see where VR goes at the moment. I think most people have, if they've had a punt, it's been on the Meta Quest. I forgot the name right. It is the Meta Quest, isn't it? So most people have had a punt on that outside of tech circles, I think. So yeah, not a surprise. It's a bit of a shame that there isn't more of a compelling reason for it.
Yeah, I'd go with that. And this is exactly why I think the Apple Vision Pro may be a problem. It doesn't have the killer app. You know, everybody thought gaming was the killer app. It's clearly not worked out for Sony. You've got a nice big fat high frequency TV that you're not cutting yourself off from your family like you've pointed out a few times. And it can be a more joint experience. You can pass the controller on to someone else. It doesn't need to rescan your eyeballs every time you do it. You don't need to, I'm wearing glasses, I'm not wearing glasses, all that kind of stuff too. So it doesn't really surprise me that VR is failing to take off. And I think the sooner Apple Vision Pro releases in other markets, it's probably a sign of how badly it's done comparatively in the US.
Yeah, potentially, and it is a lot of money. Let's not forget the $3,500 that it costs.
Yeah, and it's like I said at the top. I think it's a vicious circle, isn't it? It's a lot of money. You've annoyed developers. You haven't really got the killer app. It's a nice piece of hardware. Everybody says a bit heavy after about 2 hours. It's a hard sell. It's definitely a hard sell.
And if there was a compelling reason, like there were 5 amazing games, you just got to have them, I'm sure they would have shifted units.
For sure. I mean, people bought Windows PCs, but DOS PCs because of VisiCalc and Macs because of Excel spreadsheets. And I know there was a reason that it was, or desktop publishing. There was always that next frontier of why you bought a device. The iPhone had, well, not the App Store when it launched, but you had the internet in the palm of your hand. You know, it did better text messaging. It didn't have much of a camera at launch, if it had a camera at all. I don't think it had a camera at all at launch, actually, now I think about it.
The iPhone?
Yeah,
it was 2 megapixels. It was in the
2 megapixels.
It was in the same corner of the back body that it is today, and it was horrific. But it had everything. Largely, the phone had everything it had now. Obviously, it didn't have a front-facing camera.
Didn't have a front-facing camera. Didn't have an app store, but it had enough, you know, between Safari as a web browser, and it was just sort of right at that forefront. I still don't think VR's got that.
No, I think you're right. It's got a long way to go, and the price has got to come down. What will happen is the price will come down, as Apple is good at doing, and then they'll get everybody comfortable with it, and then they'll start putting the price back up again, because that's what we've done with the iPhones. The price came down, everybody's got into it, and then the price over the years has slowly stepped up, and you can just see that's what they're going to do now.
Yeah, fair enough. Moving on, a little bit of software update news that I've actually been bitten by as well. So there's a report in Ars Technica that USB hubs and a few other bits and pieces have been broken by the latest update to macOS Sonoma 14.4 update. I am experiencing the USB hubs thing. So at work, I have a USB-C hub. Actually, it's more than that. It's a Thunderbolt 4 dock that lets me connect to external screens with one cable and a couple of other bits and pieces, and it just randomly disconnects now. So I lose connectivity on both screens. All the windows regather on my Mac in the middle, and then about 30 seconds later, it will reconnect with me doing nothing, and the windows push it a bit again. It's extremely annoying.
Yeah, it's bizarre. They haven't got a patch out for this, because it does seem a lot more widespread than I originally realised.
Yeah, it's quite a nasty one, really. If it starts doing it on this screen tonight, I might be a bit stuck, but so far this one's been a bit more stable.
Yeah, now's probably not a good time to tell you my screen is plugged in with USB-C, so's my mic, so's my camera. Hopefully we'll be all right.
Let's just wing it and keep going. We haven't had too many disasters so far this evening, but there's always time. Moving on, and in similar sort of vein with connecting external things to it, there's a report that the M3 MacBook Air loses nearly 50% of its performance when it's used in clamshell mode. So clamshell mode is lid shut, connected to external displays. That's quite a performance drop.
It is. Do you know if you've got one screen on, does it have that massive performance drop, or is it if you just use the 2 screens?
I think it was just one screen. I don't know what size of screen it is. There's a whole video from Max Tech that this has been produced from. But they're quite good, Max Tech, at doing these sort of kind of performance tests. They were one of the first YouTube channels I saw that sort of really pushed the Apple Vision Pro, and they quite often compare them against Windows laptops. They've tried to have similar renders and all the rest of it. So they're quite exhaustive in their testing. So if they've noticed it's a thing, it's a thing.
Why do you think that is? Is it air circulation?
The suspicion is that it's heating. Yeah, you might get a little more cooling to it with the lid open, and you haven't got all the, it's not trapped inside the body of the machine at that point, because we know they're only passively cooled. They have no fans in the MacBook Air.
Yeah, it's not good, is it? Because there was me thinking, I occasionally use my MacBook Pro. I've got the M1 version, and if I use that in clamshell mode, will that be the same? But that's got a fan in it, so hopefully not. And that is a reason for going Pro. I said I would have bought the Pro because it's got the better screen, but I had forgot about it's got active cooling. So that's a bit disappointing, seeing as there's been a little bit of hype about, oh, great, you can now buy an Air, use it with 2 screens. But if your performance is going to drop off, now most people probably wouldn't notice because I think the chips are so good that your average user would notice. But if you have bought, I guess if you bought it for its computational power, you probably are a Pro user though, aren't you?
Yeah, you probably are a pro user. It's one of those that I think is slightly artificial, isn't it? Running these benchmarks really stresses the chips. It pushes them up as hot as they're likely to get. You're going to get throttling in that case as well. And the chances are, if you really pushed it lid open, you might start to see some throttling as well. And that's been fairly apparent on Macs before now. So it's a bit chicken and egg. Your average user, 2 screens, running one Excel spreadsheet and maybe a browser window open than the other one, it would probably never notice something like this, but pushing a benchmark really hard against it is really going to make the chip work. So, but interesting, I'll say.
No, it is interesting. Is it clamshell gate, or have we not got to a gate yet?
I don't think this is a gate. It's maybe just like a style or something like that over a fence. That might be just a British thing. Sorry, American listeners. A style is like a step that lets you step over a gate.
Yeah, I think this is just an FYI. I think this will be a nothingness. I think it's great they've added the functionality for the few people in the world that will do it. Most pro users will buy a MacBook Pro, I'm sure. So still go and buy your M3 MacBook Air because it's an awesome machine.
It's a good machine. You already said this at the top of the show, but do you want to just reiterate your sadness about this?
Still no new iPads. Apparently, announcement's going to be March the 26th. That's next week. And apparently there's 2 new iPad Airs coming in different sizes, which we have discussed. But apparently they're being shipped to the US right now from China. So all the noises are there for us to get new iPads. We just need Apple to tell us what they are, please. Because I am waiting to pre-order one. That's where I'm at. I'm going to get myself a new toy. I want a new toy. I've had my iPad for 3 years. I'm there.
Yeah, still not excited. For me, the iPad reached perfection in 2018 with the iPad Pro. They haven't really changed it since. It's all about software, baby. You know, you need to do something significant with that to convince me this is a device worth having in my life.
I can see it. If my company had a policy where I could use BYOD for a Mac, I would be with you, but we don't. It's an iPad or nothing. So I can see where you're at, but I'm wedded to the iPad lifestyle.
If only you knew someone in the company that could affect that particular policy.
Yeah. It's not going to happen. Anyway, let's move on. So that was all I was going to say on the iPad piece. Any day now, I'm waiting for the news, but maybe I have to wait till the 26th.
Speaking of news, let's move on and do the news. And we've got a couple of stories around AI, mostly involving Apple, but one not. So we've grouped them all together just for ease of consumption. The first one was pretty much from this morning, actually. This is The Verge reporting that Apple's AI ambitions could include Google or OpenAI. So basically, can Apple make use of an AI large language model, as we've talked about repeatedly on this show, on the iPhone within the Apple platforms? And they may not. I don't know if it's about them having enough expertise to do it, but maybe this could let them steal a march on people who already have experience. And, you know, Microsoft make use of OpenAI. Google have obviously got their own AI tools, which haven't been without controversy either. I don't know if you've been following. Somebody asked for a representation of the founding fathers of America, famously all white dudes, and it picked a gender and ethnic diverse group of people to show within the image, which is laudable on one hand. Google's algorithm has been told not to just show a bunch of white dudes, but at the same time historically inaccurate. So we're always hitting the boundaries of what these tools are able to do, and now Apple are considering making use of these too.
Yeah, it's super interesting. There's a lot of smoke around the Apple AI fire, considering we had all of last year where Apple didn't even utter the words AI. And this year, we haven't even had them do an event, and they're talking about AI on their chips. There's these articles we're about to talk through now, so super interesting. But yeah, interesting. Apple are going to partner with Google. Maybe they're trying to replace revenue that they're going to lose from them being the default search engine to revenue Google are going to give them to use their AI tools. Because I think Google is struggling a little bit because OpenAI, obviously they're the forerunners at the moment, aren't they? They beat Google at their own game in essence. They're the upstart. So I think it's going to be super interesting this year how this is all going to play out, and are Apple going to do anything different with some of these services? Are they just going to license it and use what's already there, or are they doing some special sauce on the top?
I think why not both? They're probably working on their own things. They've published papers about that. We've talked about that up till now. They've released a couple of tentative things on GitHub to make use of their large language models. We've already talked about what they've got within Photos and things like that they already use. I presume for most things what they want is a model will run within the secure enclave on the phone or on your Mac that doesn't go off to the internet to do things. But at the same time, they need those touch points when you do go out and ask for facts, that you want to go to an authoritative source, which neither of these things are at this point, but presumably they're working on these too. So let's face it, Google and Apple have worked together for a long time. They may have disagreements about Android. Steve didn't like the fact that Android was a blatant knockoff of iOS, but Apple makes $10 billion a year from Google as part of the search deal. So, you know, they can find common ground and they can come together on stuff like this. And equally with OpenAI, if it's good enough for Microsoft, it's good enough for Apple. I don't think it stops Microsoft doing their own research in LLMs. So I think this is just big tech being big tech.
Yeah, I think it's going to be super interesting just to see how Apple announce it, put the story behind it, and what they give us. And they're going to put something on the top of it. maybe it's how you interact with it, how they obfuscate it. I'm super looking forward to it.
And that leads us into the next story, which is that Apple has acquired an AI startup called Darwin AI, and that's probably going to get figured into this as well. If you remember, Siri was a purchase too. They didn't invent that in-house. That was purchased elsewhere and put on to replace the voice activation. I forget what it was originally called in the iPhone.
Yeah, it replaced, maybe it was voice activation. So the predecessor to the iOS version that came with Siri, it was quite cool because it would work on device. You would go, hey, phone, insert person here, and it would do it. Whereas Siri had to go off to the internet for everything. And so it was a lot harder to use when you were mobile, especially 10, 15 years ago, whenever, I think it was 2011 it came out. Obviously, internet wasn't as prevalent as what it is now. So it was a little frustrating to begin with. But yeah, they brought it in. It's a shame they didn't buy in Siri 2 at some point in the last 10 years, but there you go. This one's going to be interesting. I wonder, though, whether Darwin AI it feels like, unless they've been working together prior to acquisition, it feels like this is too late to go into this year's iOS, because let's look at Apple Music Classical. It took them 2 years to roll anything to do with that in. So I wonder whether this will be years down the line, but who knows?
Well, no, they're not distracted with a car. I think the chances have got to be slightly better of being able to move slightly more agilely. And they've said is that a word, agilely? Some of the people within the car team have been moved to be on the AI teams. So this Darwin AI was apparently designed for visually inspecting components during manufacturing. That sounds like something they'd be interested in too, frankly. They make a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So
could be good for internal consumption.
Exactly. It's good for them building Macs, laptops, cameras, monitors, all the things that they do, or potentially using third-party suppliers to make sure they're giving them the quality that they expect externally, at least. So that's useful. But then if it's also good for not touching the internet and doing it, that's also not competitive advantage, because like you say, they're behind the curve. But it's an interesting thing.
But I don't mind Apple being behind, as long as they catch up very quickly and come out with something. And hopefully they will, and it'll be good to see Apple's take on AI services, because we've seen Microsoft's, and to be fair to Microsoft, they've sprinkled it everywhere. So it'll be really interesting to see what Apple do with it.
Yeah, we will have to see. And then, overarching all this, as we've already talked about repeatedly on this show, are governments. So we know the UK government has been looking at things, we know the US government has been looking at things, but now the EU has actually passed an AI Act. So this is the bloc's landmark regulation, paving the way for the EU to prohibit certain uses of the technology and demand transparency for providers. So this isn't a surprise, really. The EU has banned other things, it's enforced others. We've got the DMA, more news on that later as well. So it's not a surprise that they're getting in fast with the regulation of this.
It's good they're doing it ahead of time, in a way. We've got some AI out there, whereas I think they took too long with the Digital Markets Act, as we've commented before. Maybe if Apple would police themselves. So it's great that they're actually on top of this, rather than letting everybody run away with AI and then trying to retrospectively do it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's trying to prohibit things that it classifies as high risk. High risk things include social scoring and emotion recognition at work or schools, or systems designed to influence behavior or exploit user vulnerabilities. So using an AI for hacking purposes as much as anything else, and some of these other behaviors that we've seen. The article says it probably won't affect much until about 2025, which is when the Act's designed to come into force. But having this as a flag in the sand, really, so developers of AI are aware of what's going to be out from the outset, I think is a good thing.
No, I completely agree with you. I think they can build around it from day one rather than, like I say, retrospectively. So no, it looks good. And to be fair to the EU, they're on it at the moment, aren't they? They're on a roll.
Certainly the laws are coming thick and fast, aren't they?
Yeah,
and the DMA, I think, is going to be a positive thing in the long run. I still remain slightly aghast at John Gruber's take on all of the EU stuff. He keeps saying things about the EU being a problem and it causing Apple, and they should do it despite their face, while not realizing, I think, the good that the EU is doing. And actually taking control of this, because Apple would run ramshackle over all of us, and so would Google, and so would Meta. This isn't a purely Apple thing. Apple is getting the brunt of it at the moment because of their malicious compliance, but I think it's right that they are being held to task about it.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. They are being held to task with it, and they're dealing with everybody. I think it is good, and I think it is the right thing. I think we just need it all to settle down and to actually see what it looks like, and it needs to be wider than just the EU. I'm sad we're out the EU. I'm even sadder that we're out the EU.
Yeah, it just keeps coming back to bite us, doesn't it, Brexit? Moving on, do you want to tell us about 2 new AirPod model rumours?
Not really, for a person who bought 2 pairs of AirPods last year so he could go full USB-C, and then they released the case, I don't know, about 3 weeks after I bought mine, and I was grumpy to say the least. But I'm sure one of my children will be grateful of the fact that there's a nearly brand spanking new pair of AirPods coming to them at some point. I kind of see AirPods now as, I'm probably going to be on the AirPod gravy train every year now, because I think they're just so good. It's going to take a lot for me not to buy another pair, because I think every year that they just manage to cram so much good gubbins in it. But hey-ho, let's see what they come up with. So what have we got? We've got 2 news. We've got the AirPods 4 we're going to be up to, aren't we? So my wife's got the AirPods 3, loves the things. I struggle with them because they don't have the pro tips on the end, but for her ears, she loves them. I don't think she would like the pro ones, and a lot of people don't like the pro ones. So there's definitely that market, I think, for the 2 types, because not everybody wants the rubber gaskets that you put on the end. I don't know what the right word is for that. Is it tips, gaskets?
The different kind of tips, aren't they? You get foam ones or you get in-ear ones, and the AirPods Pro are definitely more in-ear than on-ear.
But it's interesting they're going to introduce 2 new models. So what does that mean? You know, is there going to be... I think this is just 2 new regular AirPods, because it says the updated Pros aren't going to come till later, like till next year. So it'll be interesting to see what they're going to bring. Is it just going to be a Lightning and a USB-C one? Because obviously we still have Lightning phones out there. Maybe people want that. But I wonder if they're going to start differentiating the regular lineup. You know, you can have AirPods Air and AirPods. You know, I'm trying to work out what Apple would call them. So that's going to be interesting. But it makes sense for them to drop these every year, because people love AirPods. The batteries don't last forever. There's some great functionality in it. The sound can always get better. The Find My functionality could come to them. So,
yeah, I mean, that is the rumour. The primary one is Find My comes to the standard AirPods as well as the AirPod Pros. Don't work all that well. I got to say, my youngest daughter lost my old AirPods Pro in a car park somewhere. Well, I say lost. She lost the case and one AirPod. And it didn't actually go off that she'd left them behind till about an hour later, by which point we were long past the point of being able to turn around and get them. So Find My is a nice concept, but I don't always find it's all that reliable for telling you you've left something behind, your AirTag is left behind. Normally it's 20 minutes after you've left that location. It's fine when you go to look for something, most times, but AirPods less so, and you know, it does need a little bit of work.
yeah, so I have the AirPods Pro 2, and you know what? I couldn't find the case at the weekend, and it had one AirPod in it. I had one in. I was listening to a podcast. It's in my house. I fired up the Find My app, and it's the first time I've ever used it. I got it to make a noise, and I could kind of hear it coming from a room, but I got in the room and I couldn't find it. And so I used the Find My thing, and that's where the whole screen goes, and it goes, you're 4 foot away, you're 3 foot away. And it took me straight to them. They'd fallen underneath the sofa, and I was actually super impressed with it, because it's the first time I've really used it, and it directed me there. But that was me going, I don't know where my AirPod case is. I know it's not in my pocket. Whereas that's a different use case to your scenario, where it's not alerting you quick enough that you've left them behind.
Yeah, it does work quite well for that. AirTags particularly, when I've lost keys and I've got them on there, it will take you there. I lose keys less often than I think I would at the moment, but as I get older, I don't think it's a bad thing to have.
You know what's going to happen tomorrow, right?
I'm going to lose my keys. Moving on, we're going to have a couple of Microsoft stories, and the first one is the good old culprit of them stuffing yet more ads onto Windows. So if you're a Windows user and you install Chrome, you get this random advert telling you that actually Bing is better, you can use GPT-4, there's all this stuff in Bing AI. Don't switch to Google Chrome, please use Edge. Please stick to Microsoft Bing. This is just disgusting that they keep pushing these ads, pop-up ads on Windows users who've paid for the operating system, are presumably reasonably well embedded in the Microsoft operating system and experience, and then they're jamming this in your face. It's just disgusting.
It's not a great look, is it? And this is more for you to have Bing as your default search engine than Google search, but it's just not a good look. I don't know. Microsoft, it should be compelling enough for people to go there. And then when they go there, pop up and go, you could change your default. But I don't know. It does seem a little desperate, but I guess they're trying to play Google at their own game and win back some of that user base. But recent reports show it's not really making an indent, is it? That Bing is still not a popular search engine.
No, it's not. I mean, there was the report we had a couple of weeks back about they tried to sell it to Apple, but because it had a bad search result, that was the end of that. Didn't know who Annie Lennox was or what Annie Lennox's first band was, wasn't it? So it's just slimy. Most Windows users have paid or had an upgrade or bought it to come with their PC at this point. They've made their choices. They switched to Google because it's in most cases still the best search engine. They switched to Chrome because it works with more things. And Edge maybe like Chrome, but people like what they like. They've made that choice. Why are you trying to push them back to something else that they won't see any noticeable benefit from? It's just slimy.
Yeah, it's not. It's just not a good look, is it? But they're going to carry on being Microsoft.
One thing that I will laud them for, though, is they've been pushing for a long time to move everybody to Office 365 as part of your Office 365 description. Certainly corporately, we get to install not physical, but actual Windows to our Windows Office apps to our Macs or PCs. I think we get 5 per user account. And we were all a bit worried that the non-subscription version go away, so you can pay. I don't know how much it is as a consumer. I think it's about £12 a month, £13 a month, something like that, to have Excel and PowerPoint and Word and access if you're a Windows user on your computer. But it's not going away. They've committed to releasing 2 more offline versions of Office, and that's probably a good thing.
I was surprised, but I agree with you. I think it's a good thing.
Yep, so Office 2024, which will come out presumably this year and will be supported for at least 5 years. So, yay, Microsoft?
Yeah, no, it's fair play to them. At least they're doing the right thing on this story.
Yeah, there are plenty of good alternatives to Microsoft Office, it must be said. If all you want is a simple word processor, Google Docs is not bad. The LibreOffice suite on Linux is also very good. What we use on my Synology, which is a variant of that LibreOffice thing, is also kept in your own cloud and it doesn't got all the features that you'd have in Word. But you'd have to go pretty deep for some of them. But there's lots of adequate replacements for Word these days where you don't need a lot of the more advanced things like document tracking and merging and integration with EndNote and and footnotes and things like that. So I think if all you want to do is write the occasional document, any of these other things are just as good. You don't need to spend it. But if you want to be super compatible, no, you've got that choice.
Yeah, and it possibly depends if you're collaborating on a document with an organisation, because most organisations have some form of Word. But equally, most apps now have web apps to collaborate on a document, so you don't need to. I don't think you need to worry as much as you used to about sending an attachment, because you can just send a link now, and so it doesn't matter whether people are using Word, whether they're using Google, or whether you're using some other bespoke version. So, yeah, I think this is good.
Fair. Moving on, and this is just a sort of addenda to the VMware Broadcom work that we've been talking about the last few months. Citrix, also a virtualization vendor, has doubled the price of its month-to-month partner licenses. And that's really going to upset a lot of people, and has upset a lot of people. Price rises to start on September 1st, 2024. Not that long to start thinking of moving away to something else if you're very embedded in that operating system. Here you go. This is the danger of sticking to long-standing vendors in a market with the bottoms falling out of it, and there are so many good open source options for people.
Yeah, I've never worked for a company that uses Citrix, but this is the theme this year with a lot of licensing and cloud systems. The costs are only going one way, and it makes it a nightmare to budget for. If you're a corporate IT team and you've got a budget for the year and you're just going to renew the same number of licenses you had last year, and all of a sudden this comes along, it's getting expensive to use some of these systems, and you think, oh, yourself, what value does it add?
Yeah, how much of your business is locked up in these kinds of things? Because if you think if you're virtualizing Windows servers, you're already paying client access licenses for your Windows servers. You're paying per core licenses for virtualization, not per chip. So if you've got a 32 core Optitron or whatever it is these days, some of the higher, more advanced Xeons that have lots and lots of hyper-threading within them, you're potentially out a lot to Microsoft before you get started. Then you're paying for all the virtualization from Citrix or VMware. This could get super expensive, super quick, and then you've got all the VDI stuff as well, the virtual desktops that for the users that are making use of it. I guess they're getting squoze at one end by things like Azure that will offer you compute in the cloud, as opposed to compute on premises, which is what a lot of these virtualization models are doing for you. So they've got to try and match that, but this is no way to keep customers on board. You can't just double your subscriptions, you're going to lose people immediately.
Yeah, or you give them too short notice so they can't quickly, get off it this year, and then you kick the can down the road till next year.
But that's deliberate.
Yeah, 100% it is a deliberate move on their part.
Yep. Moving on, we're back to DMA news, and we'll try and rattle through this fairly quickly because it's not very surprising in light of what we've been talking about the last few weeks and months. The first one is Spotify says its app updates are being held up by Apple, so if you've got an iPhone or an iPad or something like that, you'll be quite used to visiting the App Store and getting an update, getting new functionality, bug fixes, happens all the time. Whenever I check in, I've got between 10 and 15 updates if I leave it a couple of days. Quite regularly, you'll see it. Most apps will claim the update once a week. Spotify would have been here as well. Bug fixes, new features, year-end wrap-ups, all that kind of stuff. They're submitting new versions of the app, and Apple aren't signing them off, presumably because they're pissed about the €1.8 billion fine. Not a great look.
Surely you want to have the moral high ground here if you're Apple and not be a petulant child, because this is not going to help, is it? Who's this helping?
This is just, it's bizarre. And also, it makes Apple liars because they say all developers get treated the same. Yet a big multi-billion pound company like Spotify, they've said in these letters that in the past they've sent developers to Spotify to help them streamline the app. You know, they've approved and reviewed 421 versions of the Spotify app since it came around. So that sounds like they've been prioritized up to now, which makes it even worse now that they've decided to just step back from it and not do anything. Come on, Apple.
Yeah, this is, like I say, it feels very petulant, doesn't it? And if you're already in hot water with the EU, why would you why would you make it worse? But it's what I'm trying to say.
It boggles my mind. And again, Jason Snell did a good write-up about this, about how it's a known fact that Apple get pissed off with people. So you're inside the tent. You don't need to do very much, and you'll never get review products again. You have a journalist that could cut you off. The Register, a site we link to quite a lot, have quite famously been denied by Apple for many years. They never get review hardware for them because once I think they complained about one of the devices to Steve, and that's been a long-standing problem. As a multi-billion dollar, as the biggest company in the world, you can't have this childish attitude to responding to things. Reviewers should get things. You shouldn't hold up patches for companies that could be really important and lessen the impact of security on your platform, a thing you shout about all the time, just because you're a bit annoyed with them over a fine that you brought on yourself.
I completely agree with you. It's absolutely bonkers.
Yeah, it is. I think we can whip through the next two stories. Apparently, Epic has then asked a judge to enforce the Apple Store injunction. So this is an ongoing thing from a 2021 ruling, forcing Apple to allow developers of app stores to link to outside payments. Anti-steering again. Apparently, they haven't been doing that. They're still demanding the 27% outside of payment. Again, malicious compliance. They're just being slow. They're dragging their feet. They're hanging on to their money as much as they can. And you very much see a pattern emerging, don't you?
Yeah, 100% see a pattern coming here. It's just, it's so frustrating.
It really is. And as admirers and respecters and fans of the company, this is wounding. All the time this is wounding when we keep seeing these continual... It's the grind, isn't it? It's the grind against everything of them dragging their feet. It's painful.
Yeah, agreed.
And then you've got a couple of quick stories. The first one, Apple has pushed out a press statement saying they're fully complying with the DMA. And then in our next story, they're saying they're looking for a solution to prevent the core technology fee from bankrupting free app developers. So that's very contradictory, isn't it? And the fact that they keep changing these things within the DMA, now you can do web deployment, now you don't need to be an app marketplace, now this has changed, now that has changed, shows that they don't know what they're doing, and they're basically being told by the EU through the back door, that's not right, we don't like this, you're in breach of the spirit of the law. All this stuff is why they're changing it.
I might be controversial here. So I think that both those statements could be true. And I'm saying could be true because I don't know. But they could be compliant, but unhappy with the feedback they've had that, you could bankrupt a developer with the core technology fee. Sorry, I was just looking for the words. So I think both those statements could be true. But what we don't know is why they're looking at the core technology fee, because surely they looked at all this for the last 6 months before they publicised it, and they could have come up with a plan so it didn't bankrupt people and still hit the spirit of the DMA. So I think both could be accurate. They are probably compliant, but because the law doesn't say anything about bankrupting anybody, does it? But
I don't think
the mechanics of how they've done it could be better.
Yeah, I don't think it's that, though, is it? I don't think they're setting to bankrupt anybody. What they are setting out to do is make the barrier to entry so high to anybody. Apple do not have to charge 50 cents per download should you go for 1 million apps for a free app. You shouldn't have to do that. It's a free app. That if fair enough, you don't want the security that the App Store provides to you, then that's one thing. But if you're an independent developer, and I think the reading the report in the last story there about not bankrupting developers, Riley Testelt, who is the developer that came up with Alt Store and the various Nintendo emulators and things, actually met with Apple representatives, and there's a video published about the whole thing where he's talking to people from Apple, and the people from Apple are very honest about the fact they're trying to get it right. They don't want to prevent the next big hit from happening. If an overnight success story happens and your free app hits 1 million downloads, you're suddenly 5 million in debt or something like that for however much you've got to pay for the core technology fee. That doesn't seem fair. If you're not making any money off a free app in advertising or anything just because you've had a viral hit, why should you owe Apple any money for that?
Yeah. I don't know what to say. You are right.
So I on one hand, I see what you're saying, that Apple believe everything that goes through their platforms, they're entitled to a hit of. Everything. Be it free, they get the kudos, they get, to know the developers are writing the coolest stuff on the coolest platform or whatever it is. Or be it paid for, where, fair enough, they do provide services, they've got a great payment platform, they've got a good refund platform most of the time. They've got a certain amount of oversight of what goes into that, but we know that's not perfect either for all the scam apps that appear on the App Store. They're not entitled to all this kind of stuff. It's symbiotic, and I keep coming back to that. If you release a free app, Apple aren't entitled to that. You've helped their platform by getting eyeballs on your platform. You need to have an iPhone to run the new hotness anyway. Apple have made their 1,300 quid off me, for that device to do it. Why are they entitled to 30% of every developer's thing going forward from that point onward? And this is why the EU and big governments have got involved with it, because it's a tough nut to crack. I can see both sides of the story, but in cases like this, where it is a free app, why the hell should a developer of a free app have to pay out Apple 50 cents per particular install beyond a certain amount of installs? That makes no sense at all.
I guess it makes some sense, because obviously Apple have to run the infrastructure, but for the distribution, they've got to pay people to do the app review. I can see Rod's pulling faces for anybody not listening, but I'm trying to be a little devil's advocate, because I can see some of it, but to a point. But I think and it is to a point. But obviously the big thing that when they did announce the App Store is, we will do all this for you, and now you're not going to do that for me.
No, and that's fair. They provide the tools, they provide Xcode, they have got servers to stand up, they've got an app store, they've got a search engine, they've got their own advertising that they push in your face when you are searching in that app store if you want to get that raised to a higher thing. So they've made money off me by the device that I've bought. They're making money off me by putting adverts in my face. They're making money off developers to push that advertising and push their apps higher within the app store to get those results. They're making money off Google for search results. So, they've made a lot of money before it gets to the point where all they've got to do is host a link and push it around their CDN, which is the data network that the various data centers live on around the world. So I'm not that sympathetic to this particular argument where people pay for their iCloud, people pay for their Apple One account, people pay for the devices, people pay for more than one generally, as I sit here talking to you, my Mac through my phone, with my Apple Watch on my wrist, with my Apple keyboard in front of me, etc., etc., etc. They've had quite a lot of money out of me, and I would suspect most developers are in the same sort of boat. They've bought a Mac just to do that in the first place. They're probably playing the Apple developer program of $99 a year. They've probably paid that multiple years in a row. There's a lot of money gone into the system before it's hosting a little bit of data for the odd app that goes viral, because let's face it, most of them don't. I don't have a lot of sympathy for the fact that they're having to put a lot of infrastructure up, because again, it's symbiotic. Nobody would buy an iPhone without the killer app being on it in the first place. We can agree to disagree.
No, I don't disagree with you. I think I was just trying to be a little devil's advocate, because I can see it to a point, but the point is a very long point with me, and I think you are right on a lot of what you've said. I think my point is, I think there should be some form of charge, but it doesn't need to be what it is. And it's harder, I think, for Apple to justify any charge, because they're such a big company that makes so much money. And it's not like they're a startup and they're doing it on a shoestring. So that's probably where my argument massively falls to its knees, because it's hard to argue with Apple when they've got so much cash in the bank and they charge so much for their products. It's like trying to justify the cost of a RAM upgrade with Apple. You can't really justify it, but you just have to pay it.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. They've already taken their tax out of us in one way or another, and this is the slimmest of overheads for them to run this kind of stuff. We know they're not good at servers. They probably outsource most of it. And yes, I'm not saying there's no cost to it, but I think the balance is wrong. Anyway, that's an
Agreed.
argument we'll no doubt pick up another day. Let's move on and do some media for a change.
Media. So first up, you've put this one in, I think. I was like, what's GBBO? And then I was like, I think that's Great British Bake Off.
Yeah, so Great British Bake Off is back. It's the Stand Up to Cancer specials with the celebrities. It was on Sunday night on Channel 4 at 8:15, and it was terrific. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's great to have Noel and Alison Hammond back again. They had Jodie Whittaker, who was the last Doctor Who. They had Munya Chihuahua, who was a comedian who was on Taskmaster. They had Paloma Faith, and they had some dude called Spencer off a reality TV show that I didn't know. But it was terrific. It was great to have it back on the air.
Is Spencer the blonde one? No, not the guy I'm thinking of then. The only reason I ask it, because one of these dudes off a reality show used to go to a school very close to here, and occasionally comes back and does celebrity things. I'm glad it's on. I didn't realise it, but my children will like that, so maybe that's our TV after we've recorded this podcast. But I like the Great British Bake Off. My children like it. It's good family fare for us. So yeah, I'm going to watch a bit of that, I think, after this.
And I think this one is particularly, it's a bit harder to watch than your normal Bake Off, because obviously it's Stand Up to Cancer, it's celebrities trying to give a little bit back and raise a bit of money. I immediately headed for my wallet to make a donation, I must say, because the story is particularly heartrending, but it's a very worthy cause. I think it's a great thing that they do in a very light entertainment format, but it's very important. Cancer's a big killer, and I think, you know, that's a good message to go over there. So, but yes, I thoroughly enjoyed it, but that bit's a bit tough for watch for the kids.
Yeah, and it normally makes me give. And I think you can normally text, and I normally text in and I give some money, and then a month later I look at my phone bill and go, why has my phone bill gone up so much? Why is it double what it normally is? And then, oh yeah, we gave some money to charity. And I think that's great. They've got that mechanism that you can just text it in, it just comes off your bill. It really removes the friction. So I will be doing that.
I normally do that. I thought I'd try the website this time just for a bit of variety, and there's Apple Pay. You can donate with Apple Pay too. So bringing it back to the Apple podcast, you know, we've got that too.
I always opt to pay with Apple Pay if I can, because it's just super convenient and I haven't got to type my card details in to anything.
Fair enough. Killers of the Flower Moon. No, I didn't put that here.
No, I put that here. So I finally watched Killers of the Flower Moon on Apple TV Plus, which, if people have forgotten, it's Martin Scorsese's, I don't know what you call it, epic length film, because it's well over 3 hours. So it's commitment to the cause to watch it. I watched it in about 3 sittings. I liked a lot of it, but too slow, too long. It was good, but it wasn't fantastic, if I'm honest. And I was disappointed, because I think Scorsese has made some fantastic films, generally films I really love and I've watched multiple times. I don't think this is going to be one of those films that I'm going to watch multiple times, sadly, and I was really disappointed. And I've got Napoleon next on the list. And that's another 3 hour long film, and I don't know when I'm going to watch it, but I want to see it because, again, I love Ridley Scott and I love some of the cast. But they're so long. I don't understand why they have to be so long. I think if they just sharpen everything up a little bit. I don't mind usually a 2.5 hour film, but 3 hours feels like it needs a bit of aggression in the cut and the nip and tuck.
I want to be careful how I say this, because there could be a criticism levelled at me and being slightly ageist. I hope I'm not being slightly ageist. I think they're more mature men, the pair of them, and they feel they've deserved the right to take more time to tell a story, which is legitimate. You know, I think that's reasonable. Your review of Killers of the Flower Moon is almost identical to mine. Too long, needs a good edit. Although you seem more disappointed than I was. I thought it was worthy. I thought the performances were very good, except DiCaprio's didn't hit quite as well with me as I would normally have thought when it was good, wasn't great.
He played a usual sort of character for him, though. I think it was just, yeah.
Yeah, a good film, certainly not a great film, not one I'd rush to revisit.
I think my concern is we've got a lot of great directors very recently, and I was quite excited about it. I remember I was talking about it. We had Christopher Nolan, we've got Ridley Scott, we've got Michael Mann, and we've got Martin Scorsese. There may be another one in there that I'm misremembering. I loved Oppenheimer by Christopher Nolan. I haven't seen Ferrari yet, but I'm hoping to do so as it's out on Sky here in the UK. I've got Killers of the Flower Moon, which was, for me, disappointing. I'm hoping one of these directors will rescue it because I'm just really disappointed, I think, that they've all done really long films that just aren't good enough. And it's a shame. And why can't we have, a nice, quick, tightly edited film that you can really get into?
Yeah, I think they do exist. And it's not to say you can't have a long film that's compelling. Dune Part 1 is a long film that was really compelling. So yeah. The two things aren't hand in hand. They've just got to be well constructed. And I think it's an assessment of the film as a piece of entertainment, that it's not just enough to be worthy. It's not just enough to be a good script, a great cast, etc., etc. It's got to be the whole thing. And for me, Killers of the Flower Moon was not the whole thing. It was too far on one element in the pie chart and too thin on all the other ones.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. And I'm just disappointed because I thought, and it was good, but I think it could have just been so much better if just, like I say, a nip and a tuck and just be more efficient with it. And I'm surprised by Ridley Scott's done such a long film because he's normally very succinct. But hey ho, I will report back on that when I get around to watching Napoleon.
I mean, you could say Blade Runner ran a little bit long if you were being super critical.
True.
And that's one of my favourite films.
True. And I'll report back on Ferrari as well, which I think is a lot shorter, but I think it's about 2 hours. But I will report back when I watch that one. So
it's a lot short.
So whilst we're on short films, though, I did watch Migration, which was Illumination's latest, which is the people that did all the Minion films. And it's short. It's about an hour and 20 minutes. It's not very good. I'm really disappointed because I was in the mood, film with my children. We're all tired. It's Sunday night. We've got the fire lit. Let's watch a film. The three boys on the sofa. Just very disappointing. It looked okay, but it just didn't live up to Illumination's funniness. It was an okay script, but the story just wasn't. It was just disappointing all round. It just didn't. I don't know what's wrong with me. Normally I love a film, but it just really disappointed me. It just didn't have a great, compelling story. Wasn't the best animation I've ever seen. That was a little disappointing in places, like when they did some city scenes. And I was gutted because I wanted it to be good because I think they've got a great track record with the Minion films, with Sing films, The Grinch, Despicable Me. Like, what a body of work. And this was just a little bit sad.
A bit like Pixar. Used to be great, less great now.
Luca, best Pixar film.
That's a debate for another day. Maybe we'll do that on main show. We'll debate about Pixar films.
Yeah, we could do our Pixar films in ranked order. Maybe we could save it for the summer when Inside Out 2 comes out because we will be off to the cinema to see that.
Well, anytime we're in need of a special and one of us is on holiday, maybe that's our scenario for trying to fill a bit of time.
Yeah, or we've got an even slower news week than what's this week? The week commencing the 18th of March.
A quick one from me that I've just put in at the end there, sorry for leaving it so late, was I actually watched Airplane 2 this week, which is the sequel to Airplane, the ridiculous comedy film from the 80s, the thing being, if you don't like a joke, there's another one along in a minute. Surely you can't be serious. I am serious and don't call me Shirley. Everybody knows that. Airplane 2 was the same leading man and lady, but set on a space shuttle this time instead of a airplane. It has William Shatner in it. It's just as ridiculous as the first one. Whenever I watch a film from the early 80s, I'm reminded how much nudity there was in films that just isn't a thing these days. There's always a pair of breasts in one of these kinds of things. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's stupid. It's ridiculous. There was a joke along in another 30 seconds that I thoroughly enjoyed. What a terrific... I don't know. I think it was very short as well, about hour and 20 minutes of entertainment. So I think my time was far better spent than yours.
I think you're 100% right. Sadly, I probably couldn't watch that one with my young children, but you're 100% right. Yeah. And it is amazing what people can do in a short film and tell a really good, tight story. Anyway, should we move on? Because I'm so cheesed off I watched the wrong two films this week.
Fair enough. Moving on. I'm going to talk about games. We haven't talked about games that we've played in quite a while, so I've got two stories about games I've actually played myself, on my own, by myself this week that aren't Call of Duty or Slay the Spire. The first one is called Jagged Alliance 3. Jagged Alliance 3 is a Commandos / XCOM / Marvel Midnight Suns sort of game where you control a squad of mercenaries, you get put ashore and you need to do turn-based combat to take out some bad guys and some scenarios on the land that you face. It's set in 1991. It's got some slightly odd tropes where you play action hero stars. Clearly, one of your mercenaries is Arnold. He talks about getting pumped up every so often and all the rest of it, and it's got that kind of stuff in it. I've played the first 4 maps, I think. It's quite good fun. It's a bit different to XCOM. I think you'd enjoy it more than I do. It's sort of probably spiritually closer to Commandos. But it was on sale, on the Steam sale. It's the Steam Spring Sale. It was 25 quid. Works beautifully on my Linux machine, which is one of the reasons I bought it, even though it's a Windows-only game. Yeah, I'm quite impressed with it so far. And in the review there on IGN that I've tagged, you can see they're really quite impressed with it as well for the variety of scenery and tiles and sort of world building that it's got. You've got urban landscapes, you've got country ones, you've got a variety of terrain and weapons. You can approach things very stealthily, take people out from a distance. You can use sniper rifles, or you can just wade in. It's quite a deep game, I gotta say, if you like that kind of thing. So a bit of turn-based combat makes me a happy man, and Gyrolands 3.
And that's what I was going to ask. So it is turn-based.
It's kind of got 2 modes. It's before you actually come across combat, you can select your whole squad and you can move around the map and you can do a bit of looting and you can sort of interact with the scenery. As soon as there's bad guys on the screen, though, it becomes turn-based. You make a turn, they make a turn. You've got a number of hit points. You can move a bit and then take cover and shoot next time, or you can go into an Overwatch mode and wait for the enemies to move, or how you approach the situation is up to you. And your squad that you recruit have special skills. One might be a knife guy, one might be a sniper, one might be a demolitions one. It's quite a well put together little game.
It sounds really good. I'm always mixed on turn-based, if I'm honest, because my brain just isn't clever enough to plan out all the moves and think in that way. There are some people that are fantastic at it. It's like when I play chess. Some people, like my son, will plan out moves ahead of me. I'm just not that bright.
I think you do yourself a disservice there, mate. But yeah, it's good fun anyway. If you're looking for something to scratch sort of an XCOM/Commandos itch, I think this isn't a bad shout.
It looks nice, and the graphics do look very nice.
Yeah, I'm quite impressed with that. And then the second one is called Balatro, that I think I've spelt incorrectly in the show notes. There's one L too many in that. Balatro is kind of one of those zeitgeisty games that appeared from nowhere. Spiritually, it's poker. I don't really know how to play poker. I think it's a failing of me that I don't really know what 2 of a kind is, a 3 of a kind is, or a royal flush, or any of these kind of things. I don't understand bluffing and calling, and I see it all the time in American movies, and I haven't got a clue. But I saw this review in The Guardian posted in the show notes about how this was just one of the most compelling things I'd ever played. So I bought it. I think it was 8 quid as part of the Steam sale. It's terrific. It might be the game your Steam Deck was made for, frankly. It's I don't know if it's taught me a lot about poker. It very quickly turns into not poker, and it's just kind of a card-based game with multipliers and weird and wacky things going on. It's very well presented. It's very cheap. It's very compelling. I've just thoroughly enjoyed the little bit of time I've got to spend with it this week. So Balatro, yeah.
Okay, that's quite a cool curveball. I know a little bit of poker, but probably only like a fraction more than you by the sounds of it. But yeah, I'd like to know more. It looks quite a cool game. Looks like it should be on my iPad though, rather than on my Steam Deck.
It's coming to iPad too. So okay. The current announcements are Windows and Mac. It runs well on the Steam Deck, really well on that sort of handheld sort of device, frankly.
I can see that.
But the reviews or the news has been it's coming to iPads and Android devices very shortly.
Cool. It just looks like a game that would be at home with a touch interface.
Yeah, but you can do with your Steam Deck, of course.
Yeah, obviously I always forget that. It's like with the Switch. I always forget it's got a touchscreen.
I apologise. In the background, my dog is barking. There must be somebody she's taken a dislike to going outside. So listeners, there's not a lot I can do with that. Sorry.
I'm listening to you through the wonders of Zoom, and it completely cuts it all out.
It'll all be on the microphone on the recording.
Yeah,
so.
No, I know, but it will be the weirdness of recordings. It will be there when we publish.
Moving on, and this is just quite an interesting release as much as anything else. I think I've mentioned him on the podcast before. One of the sort of games that got me into computing way back in the 80s, yes, I'm that old, is a thing called Revenge of the Mutant Camels and Attack of the Mutant Camels. And the guy that wrote those is called Jeff Minter. Bit of a coding legend from the 80s. He did stuff on the VIC-20, Commodore 64, Atari ST. He had one of the launch games on the Atari Jaguar. He still writes games to this day. He's probably one of the few original coders, those bedroom coders from back in the late 70s, early 80s, who still to this day, he doesn't have a big company, he doesn't do anything, he hasn't retired, he sits in front of his computer and he writes code to this day. He's an absolute legend. He's a local boy. He's from Carmarthen, so not very far away from here, and posts quite often toots from being in his local pub or going at the curry house or all the rest of it. Every day he does morning sheep time, where he's always had a thing about llamas and fluffy animals. He's got a sheep farm now. He's got one llama, he's got 4 or 5 sheep, and he goes out and he feeds them every morning, and he does a little video. It's quite homely and lovely, frankly. Today he's been tweeting about having gone to the dentist and he went to the pub afterwards. But this company called Digital Eclipse have done a Jeff Minter story, so it's a big American company. They do these sort of retrospectives on famous games or famous developers. And for 25 quid in the Steam store, you can buy Jeff Minter's entire back catalogue, effectively, as well as a documentary about him going back to year dot. It's just a terrific thing. I think what a great way to pay tribute to somebody that's been such an influential part of computing for such a long period of time.
No, that is cool. It's not somebody I must confess I know, but it sounds quite cool. And it's always nice when there's a developer that you associate with or some work you respected, and you know a reasonable amount around them, like more than the average person, and then something like this happens and you want to support it. I think it's really good.
Yeah, so check it out if you're at all nostalgic about these things, or just want to learn a little bit about particularly British computing history, because he was so influential to so many things. Then it's worth checking out.
Yeah, no, sorry, I'm busy clicking through all the screen grabs of the games. He's done some proper old games from the 80s. Let's go with that, or classic, shall we say?
He had a particular look, and there was certainly a lot of psychedelia in there as well. But to all come from one guy's brain, pretty much, and for it still to be working, he's well into his 70s now. I just respect, frankly.
Yeah, do you know what? That's cool, and I do respect people that don't want to climb the career ladder and are very comfortable just doing what they love. And fair play to him, because it takes quite a bit to do that, I think.
It really does. So that's Jeff Minter, worth a shout and worth a follow on Mastodon as well, actually. And last but not least, Steam has announced new family sharing features. It always had it. It was a bit difficult to get around. But now, if somebody else on your network launches a game that's in your library, it won't just kick you out of Steam altogether. It will let you continue to play it. So if you've got more than one Steam device in the house, this could be the answer to your prayers.
Why can't Nintendo and Sony do this? Because this is my biggest complaint. I've got 2 Switches. We share my account. Sometimes we want to play different games. Why can't we do that? Like, I've paid the money. I'm not buying 2 copies of Mario at £50 a piece or whatever it may be. But why can't I get we can't play the same game, but why can't we play different games? Same with Sony. I can only have one console blessed to play the games other than Fortnite. Like, come on. I don't know. I find it so frustrating that there's not a better way. And I think Apple do this quite well, to be fair to them. It sounds like Steam are going the same way. If you want people to be legitimate, then let them do this, because the other way is too restrictive. It's too cost restrictive for people. So I'm really happy to see this. I think this is good. We only have one Steam device in my house at the moment, and my children are unaware of it. So at some point I might need to share it with them. But if I did, or if I ever bought another one, this would encourage me to do that, because it means we can all play at the same time and we don't have to have arguments.
Yeah, this is a great thing, I think. If you had a couple of Steam Decks, one account signed into them, one person can be playing Dishonored on one, somebody else can be playing Command and Conquer on another. Well done, Valve. This is great.
Yeah, 100%. This is a good bit of engineering. Thank you very much.
Yeah. There we are. Sorry for having been so tardy with the game section for such a long period of time. Hopefully we've made up for it a little bit now.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just in nowhere land at the moment. I'm not even playing any old Commandos or Red Alert or bit of Gran Turismo. I've just played nothing for weeks, so I need to find my slot for gaming again.
You're a busy man. Somewhere in our follow-up, you've got to play a game of Warzone with me as well, I seem to recall.
Yeah, that is more problematic, because whilst I have 2 PlayStations, I have two children. So that is something I need to deal with at some point.
Time for the 3rd PlayStation, clearly.
Let's wait for the Pro.
Moving on, shall we do a main show?
Yeah, I'm quite looking forward to this one.
This is it's kind of an odd topic, really, that you and I have repeatedly talked about how we work. You've plugged your iPad into a quite ridiculous screen for an iPad, frankly, but you've made it work for you. You know, you've got a setup now that works well for your work. It works well for your workplace. That's interesting. I have a couple of setups I move between. I've got my one at work with 2 external screens, and I come home to a very wide external screen. And, you know,
Sorry, my leg just went. But no, I was going to say, you commented on the fact that my 27-inch Mac Studio display costs the same amount as I paid for my iPad.
I might be commenting on that, but not even in so much detail. I think your setup is what works for you, and if that's what makes you happy, you've got your one cable connection. It gives you the fidelity that you want. That your iPad's a bit more capable than it was 3 years ago, 4 years ago. You're able to do what you want to do with it, and that's great. But that working environment, I think, is just something worth analysing in the light of some new modern technology that we've talked about on this show. So we talked about monitors quite a lot. We've talked about Sidecar and those kinds of technologies that Apple have given us, where you can park an iPad next to your Mac and you can sort of extend your desktop onto that, or you can just use it, the cursor moves between them. It's not called Sidecar, is it? What's it called?
I was going to say continuity, but that's the wrong word as well.
That's the camera.
So Sidecar is where you can use your iPad as a second screen to your Mac, and then you've got the one where you can use your Mac and then move your mouse over to the side and it will appear magically on your iPad or I think another Mac, and you can use it across devices, which is fantastic. But the software has moved on a lot. I should just confess up front though, I wanted to buy an Apple screen because I'd never bought an Apple screen, and I just really wanted a really nice Apple made screen, and I've scratched that itch now.
But this is more as technology is advancing, and when you are out in the world and you've only got your iPad with you, in my case I've only got my laptop with me because who wants an iPad to take on the road, is that I have seen people on trains using extended screens. So you can buy for about 130 quid off Amazon 1080p screens that plug in with a USB cable that give you that second screen next to your laptop. If you haven't got an iPad, then you need to do that kind of thing. And these are quite cool. But the next generation of these are folding ones. So in the same way we've got folding phones now, you're beginning to see foldable displays that you can stick in your laptop case next to your laptop, and off you go. You've then got, a 14-inch screen. You've got a 28-inch screen. You can just unfold out of your bag and stick it next to your computer. And that, I think, changes things quite a lot for the ability for what you're able to do when you're on the road. I just thought that was worth a bit of a discussion.
I think it is a good discussion. I think the other thing we should just cover off before we go down the portable screen, is that obviously most offices you go to these days, they've all got USB-C, and I think that's the game changer. You're not turning up to an office and they've got a proprietary dock connector where you can only use a certain type of laptop. Everyone's got USB-C, and so when I go, even just within our own company, let alone going to other companies, I can just plug my iPad in anywhere now, and I can use a second screen, and if there's a keyboard and mouse there, I can use that too. And I think the USB-C piece has revolutionised it. And I know we've joked about me wanting to buy an iPad, but actually I want to buy a smaller iPad because now I can plug in a second screen, and nearly anywhere I go, there's a USB-C screen available to me. I don't really need a bigger iPad anymore because I can just use wherever I'm going to, I can use whatever they have, and I'd rather have a little bit more portability in it. And this is why I'm quite interested with these screens, because maybe if I was going to go away for a week with the family but knew I had to do some work, maybe a portable screen like this could be a good option. Or if you're going to go and work at a friend's house or whatever it may be, or somewhere where you are a little bit not in a corporate office, I think these second screens are very compelling. And I keep giving them the side eye from time to time, but I haven't seen the one that's for me. And maybe the one for me, I probably do want a Retina screen ultimately, but that would jack up the cost and the size. What do you make of them?
Well, I quite like the notion of them. And back when I did carry an iPad at the same time, I didn't see the point because, I'm already carrying two things in my bag. Why would I carry a third thing in my bag? And I think Apple have sort of pushed that down the road a little bit by letting you extend your iPad screen in Sidecar mode or whatever we're going to call it. They are interesting. If I'm away from my desk for an extended period of time, I go to a conference, we've had this discussion before, it tends to be for a week. If I've got a lot of work that needs doing, it is really handy to be able to shove some of those windows onto another screen, as you do with your iPad, actually. So I think the working thing that you see in offices with having multiple displays is one thing, but having that ability just to extend it, a 14-inch screen into another 14-inch screen or 17, or whatever it is you've got, without having to carry something super heavy around with you, is just... And if the price is right, it's super compelling, isn't it? I think for 130 quid, these things make complete sense. This particular screen we're talking about is probably going to be around $2,000, which is an awful lot of money.
But I'm okay with that as a starting place, because that's the worst it will be. It will come down over time. I wouldn't pay $2,000 for it. That's too rich for my blood for a screen that I would just use occasionally. But over time it's going to improve. It will come down, and then it will become interesting.
And this is 2560 by 1920 pixels wise, which is pretty good. That's like a 2K screen, effectively, width-wise. So this particular one is a 12.5-inch screen that unfolds to be a 17.3-inch portable monitor. That is nice. I think that is a huge amount of extra real estate than you've got from the 14-inch screen you've got on your laptop, or the 16-inch I've got on mine even. That's twice the screen display resolution, basically, so that I can push a bunch of stuff off. You can be productive on that when you're on the road, when you're out and about, and it's not adding an awful lot of weight to your bag. Now, it is adding quite a lot of weight to your wallet, but as you've just said, this is day one with something like this, and these screens are only going to get better, they're going to get cheaper, they're going to get brighter, and they're going to get higher resolution. And you think, we're not that far away from properly foldable screens that maybe fold in more than one dimension to take up almost no space in your bag. It becomes a real game changer then, and you can imagine having something like, a collapsible Bluetooth keyboard and your iPad, and then think of the resolution you've got out there in the world, if Apple let us have better operating systems. But this, to me, is one of those potentially transformative technologies that we haven't really thought through what it means. Slightly smaller phone in your pocket is one thing, slightly smaller iPad in your breast pocket is another. But actually, vast screen you can just unfold when you're out and about anywhere. Why do you need a Vision Pro?
Ooh, that's controversial. But no, I think I'm largely with you here. I think I've always fancied a portable monitor, but just, like I say, just haven't quite found the one for me. And I probably don't travel enough at the moment, but certainly if I was in hotel rooms and things and working, having a second screen I could just pop out, fantastic. Or even for me, when I go up to the house, having a second screen I could take up, put it on the dining table if I just wanted to work there for a bit. I would be all over this. So I'm really interested in this space because I do like the notion of work from anywhere. I think that's quite important. It's nice to have your office for when you've got your serious meetings, but it's nice to go and work in other places. I think it's quite healthy to do it and have a change of scenery. I worked in my house earlier today. It was nice. Sat at the kitchen table. I stood on the island for a little bit. But was it as useful because I didn't have my second screen to put my spreadsheet on or my Teams call? It was a little cramped, but that's 90% of the time I do have a second screen. So I'm lucky there, and I think most people are used to that environment where you've got multiple screens now.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a sulk on this podcast about the fact that the new MacBook Pro couldn't do extended displays. It couldn't power more monitors. It's got USB ports. It's got USB-C ports. Presumably, these kinds of things have got hubs and things built into them too. It just gives you that bit more flexibility when you're out and about. And we have seen the slight rise of Lenovo, particularly doing foldable laptops. So you remember there was the Yoga Pad that would fold backwards with two screens. One would turn into a keyboard, one would turn into a display. Again, we're just at the beginning of what's possible. Now we've got foldable displays, and I just think this is a real interesting marker for where we go next, both in terms of productivity, what we can carry around with us, and just how cool it is. So you talk about we don't have enough cool gadgets anymore. This is properly cool gadgets.
Yeah, that's fair. You are right. This is quite a cool gadget, and the one we're looking at is OLED as well. It's not just LED, it's OLED, which I love an OLED screen, so I'm quite excited by this. I would, like I said, I think I'd be a lot more interested once they hit 4K, not price, but as in resolution, and the price starts coming down. I can see the appeal. Yeah,
so that was all really, just sort of a glimpse for technology to come. We don't need to go any more detail than that, but yeah, I think it's cool, it's interesting, and a space to watch.
Yeah, the monitor space is interesting, I think, and we've all got our personal preferences. So, it's going to heat up, I think. This could be an area where there is innovation, hopefully, over the next couple of years.
So, I think that was an interesting discussion. Doesn't need to be very long. It's just something cool to feature, right?
It's nice to talk about something different, and maybe some of our listeners out there are in the need for a second display. And whilst you were talking, I was just looking them up. And for sort of £170, you can get like a Lenovo ThinkVision 14-inch screen, USB-C. It's £169. That seems fairly reasonable if you're just using a secondary screen. These aren't for gaming, but for using it to put your spreadsheet on, Word document, having a second screen, it seems quite a good price.
Yeah, and if you're the kind of person who wants YouTube playing in the background, watch your film while you're doing it at work, something like that, what a fantastic thing when you're on the road. You shut your laptop, just have the screen. They run off battery. There's lots of applications for them.
Yeah, and they even do like a 15-inch one that's super wide by the looks of it and quite short. So there's some interesting ones out there, and there's probably one for everybody. And there's other brands as well that are less known because I've definitely not heard of them. But there's a good mix out there. Certainly, I'm just looking on Amazon at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's a cool technology space. Cool. Should we do app of the week?
Let's do it.
So it's not an app, it's a website, but I think it's super bloomin' cool, frankly. This is a piece of information is beautiful, basically, which I've featured before when we did the famous people from near where you live. They occasionally pick out these amazing sort of visualizations and analytical approaches to things. I do a bit of analysis in the day job. I work with lots of people who do analysis. So these kinds of things I find really fascinating. I think this is a very good piece of web design, an excellent piece of analysis, and just an interesting topic apart from anything else. So these analysts went through the greatest albums of all time, as listed by Rolling Stone, going back as far as 2003. And if you scroll through the article quickly, you'll see things begin to change, like the visualizations of what were the top 10 albums in 2003 versus 2012. But then they go deeper and deeper and deeper, and they look at the demographics of how the people that have reviewed the albums have changed in terms of the first bunch of reviewers were a bunch of middle-aged or younger white guys when they realized this was a problem, and they got people from other genders and other ethnicities to start to review these things. And then the age bracket changes as well of the people that review them, and just how that alters over time as you begin to sort of flip through the decades as they've done these visualizations, and what then becomes a top 10 album or a top 50 album or a top 500 album, or indeed the greatest album of all time. By the time you get to the bottom of it, without giving too much away, there's only 2 albums from the 1950s actually make it all the way through to today, effectively. Now, in 2003, there were more than 2 albums that were in this. Frank Sinatra's one, I forget who the other one is, Elvis, I think. So isn't that amazing? And not surprising that things change over time, but what a great bit of analysis, and beautifully visualized.
Yeah, so very cool. Great seeing all the albums. But yeah, it's not a surprise, is it? Moods change, new material comes out. You need to open up, obviously, your selection panel so that you got more people on it. But yeah, it's super interesting. Like you say, the albums that end up at the end of it from where we started. And there's a lot of albums on here I don't recognise, I must confess.
There you go. You could expand your musical horizons while you're at it.
Which is the joy of streaming systems. Like, it's very easy, isn't it? Oh, look, I haven't listened to Revolver in a long time. I can just pop that on. Revolver's an album by the Beatles, by the way.
But they talk about that too, how through disputes you lose albums off this because there may not be streaming deals for them. So there could be amazing classic albums that people haven't been given the opportunity to listen to because they didn't have a streaming deal or they've fallen out with the streaming service. And that impacts whether or not an album is the greatest of all time as well. And that's part of the argument of it, is that it's not purely artistic integrity that people are reviewing albums on. It's what's available to them. It's who they've been talking to. It's Rolling Stone, it's a well-known magazine. They've got their own commercial interest to solve in order to shift magazines. So it's quite interesting that you even sort of push on that side of things too.
No, I can see that. I've had that problem with films in the past. I think I did message you the other week. I was watching Insomnia, a Christopher Nolan film, one of his lesser-known films, but it wasn't available to buy on iTunes for some reason, which is where I normally buy my films. And then I had to go and watch it, and it wasn't any streaming for a long time. And then all of a sudden, for some reason, it was on Amazon Prime, but it will only be on there for a period of time, and then it won't then be digitally available to watch. And it is the same, like you say, with albums. Sometimes you can't get some of the albums you want. I've got the same problem with some Ocean Colour Sea music I want to listen to. They're not in Apple Music, but some of their albums are, and it is a little frustrating that you get a hodgepodge, I guess.
Fair enough. Anyway, that's my app of the week. I just think it's a cool one. Thing of the week.
So thing of the week, I was thinking long and hard about this, and I've gone with the Numbers app. I don't think I've done this before, and the only reason is I use Excel a lot in my day job, but for some personal things I'm using Numbers for at home, various finance things I'm doing at the moment. And I thought, do you know what? It's actually quite a nice app. I think the guys and girls at Apple that made this app have done a fantastic job with it. It's just really easy to use it on your iPad. I use it on my phone a little bit sometimes when I'm just putting some data in. And then I might, if I'm in front of my Mac, I'll fire up on my Mac, and I can use it on all 3 platforms. And I just think it's really nicely made. I think it looks beautiful. It's spreadsheets and graphs. It's not the most exciting, but I just think they've made it in a really nice way. And I definitely prefer it to using Excel. I'm not an Excel power user, one iota, but I do use it a lot at work. I just think Numbers is lovely. I just think it's a really, really nice app to use. And I like to have that differentiation between work and home. So works in my head is all in Microsoft products, and everything at home is generally Pages, Numbers or Keynote. And that way I've got that segregation, if that makes sense.
It makes a pretty chart, I'll give it that. I do hit the bumps of numbers pretty quickly. Not that I'm particularly an Excel power user. We've featured Excel power users on this podcast before, through the video of the World Championships of Excel or whatever it was called. But yeah, it's adequate. If you haven't got Excel, I think it's good enough. Google Docs has probably got a little bit more support for more advanced features and things like that. But not everybody needs advanced features. This, if you want to do a bit of home budgeting, if you want to draw a pretty chart, if you want to, get some ideas about, bits and pieces, it's not a bad app. It's reasonably compatible. Like I say, there's some design choices I don't agree with, but I don't think I'm the target audience for something like this. I think having that separation between home and work and the day job isn't necessarily a bad thing, so I get it. I've repeatedly said that my favorite Apple app, I think, is Keynote. I think it's one of the best things they've made in a very long time. It hangs together very well, and sometimes a chart will have to go into numbers to go into Keynote, sort of to maintain that sort of data integrity. It doesn't always paste very well straight into Keynote if you're going from Excel. You sometimes need to go via numbers. So I have used it for things like that from time to time. I feel like I'm damning it with fake praise. It's an adequate app. It's an interesting choice.
I think for 3, and I did think about it. It's just I've used it a lot over the last few months for various just things I've been doing at home. But I'm just impressed. Apple give numbers pages and Keynote away for free to everybody who's got an Apple device. And I think they're actually some really good pieces of software, whereas Microsoft don't do that. If you're a Windows user using it in a non-commercial space, you have to buy Office and things. And I think fair play to Apple, you get that for nothing, and you can do quite a lot with it. They're very free-flowing. I like the spreadsheet mentality they have. Is it's not one giant spreadsheet like it is in Excel. You put a table on it, you can put another table on it, you can put another table on it, and it's more of a blank sheet where you can put tables and charts. And I just like their approach. I think it's very good.
Fair enough. Numbers. You seem to have a second choice.
I just put this in as an FYI at 10 o'clock tonight. Amazon are going to have a spring sale, so maybe there'll be some good things to buy. I know there's a Stream Deck in their spring sale, Rod, if you're interested in one of them. Other than that, there's not much I'm after at the moment personally, but let's wait and see. But I just thought I'd mention it as a PSA, I guess.
I don't know, weren't there some 2.5 gigabit Ethernet switches we were looking at?
There is that too. So I've got a bunch of things that I keep in my basket, and then when you go to the basket, it goes, these have changed in price. And you can move them. Sorry, I saved them for later, and then you can move them into your basket. So I'm doing that on a bunch of Lego and books and things, because when it hits the right price, I will purchase them. But I think I've got a lot more patient as I've got older.
Of course, power users use Camel for shopping on Amazon for products like that.
There is that too, and I usually do go and check Camel because it's fantastic, and you just give Camel the URL, and it tells you what the price and trends are over time. So you just know you're buying it. Hopefully at a good time. It may not be the cheapest, but you're not getting ripped off.
Fair play. I think we can call that a show, Chris.
I think so. So if anyone wants to get into contact with us, Rod is at G5Maniac at Mastodon.Scott. I'm at _CJP at Mastodon.social. You can watch it on YouTube at t.ly/7w5ta, or you can drop us an email at wakefromsleep@protonmail.com.
Talk to you next week.
Cheers, Rod.